season and infusing them with so much confidence going into the playoffs.
Yeah. This is not like that team. They don't feel like the 2012 team. 13 through 16 was when you expected them to win every game. Right? They won the Super Bowl. They went back to the Super Bowl. You had the next 2 years of, still really great play. During that time, you basically expected them to win every game. Then they missed the playoffs. And then the last few years, like was it 2018 through 20? It felt like they were still hanging on to the past a little bit. There were the debates about Russ and letting him cook and this, that, and the other. But it was not the same, and we all knew it. Mm-hmm. Right? We were trying to, build up the same energy, the same excitement, the same expectation, but it wasn't there.
No.
Right? It just wasn't there.
No, you had some veterans kind of hanging on. You had some young players that you just knew weren't quite there, right? That you had drafted, you tried to grow into the roles of replacing some of the superstars that had moved on, but your safety, you never really, you never found a replacement for Cam and for Earl. And you tried to draft and you tried to bring people in, and ultimately Quandre's come in and been the closest replica to those guys.
You were in between. You weren't sure what you were doing at that point, right? Are you trying to hang on? Are you trying to, move forward? And it didn't work. But they made the playoffs because they had enough talent still, and Pete's a good coach, and Russ was playing still at the top of his game, et cetera. And so you kept making the playoffs, but it didn't feel the same. So I don't think this feels like any of those years. It doesn't feel like 2012. It doesn't feel like 13 through 16. And it doesn't really feel like 18 through 20. The closest it might feel like is 2010. And I don't think that's a great comp either. But if I had to say what year is this most similar to, I'd say 2010. You went 7-9. You found your way into the playoffs in that final game of the season when Charlie Whitehurst beat Mark Bulger and the Rams, right? Then you win your first playoff game. It was at home. It was a little funky because you got to be at home after the 7-9 season. But Marshawn, Beastquake, Matt Hasselbeck, right? You remember how all of that went. That's the closest comp I think I could come up with for this playoff season for the Seahawks.
Yes.
And it's still not perfect because that group was older and in transition, whereas this group is younger and on the rise, but just not quite where the 2012 group was.
Yep.
It's still the best one I can come up with.
Yes. It's almost a blend. It's probably closer to 2011 when they don't make the playoffs, to be honest with you.
That's true. Yeah, that's
right?
a really
when
good
Sherm
point.
and KJ and some of those young bucks
and
are
Tavares
there.
And
with T-Jack, playing through injury, and what a tough guy and beloved and handled it all so well. And you could see these young guys taking their lumps at times, but also just being playmakers and starting to build like, hey, man, this thing, you add a couple pieces here, right? You find maybe that difference-making quarterback, or you add even more talent to it, which they did in 2012, right? Which is the epic draft class of Bobby and Bruce and Russ and starters down the road. Yeah, this feels the most, to be honest with you, as you kind of laid that out to a non-playoff team in 2011. 7-9. Yeah, let's beat Carroll before Russell. 7-9, 7-9. But that 7-9 team, you knew, boy, you add a few more gears to this machine, you have a chance. And then 2012 did come, and look out.
Yeah, maybe that's a good way of looking at it. The 2011
2010 was just pieces, right? It was Tyler Columbus. Right. It was, you go back and look at the guys playing in that game. God bless them in that season. And Matt Hasselbeck trying to buy into everything Pete was preaching, and you knew that, as beloved as Matt was, and Pro Bowler and Ring of Famer, that he was not going to be Pete Carroll's quarterback of the future, but he's trying to help build the foundation and trying to believe everything that Pete is preaching, as all of us were. But it was a sum of a lot of veteran
as I said,
parts.
it doesn't really fit any of those years that they made the playoffs. I think you're right. 2011, the second year with Tavares Jackson here, is probably a little bit better comp because you had some of the pieces in place. You were starting to feel like you were putting together a good football team, but you weren't there yet. And that, in fact, not even really close. They were 7-9. Tavares was hurt for a lot of that year. What was he playing through a torn pec and all that, right? And it ends up leading, of course, to the drafting of Russell Wilson the next year. But no, I think that is a really good comp. Now, as for whether or not next year involves a quarterback change again, I don't know. I mean, that's going to be a conversation. I talked to G about this yesterday. I was on their show, G and Ursula, over on our sister station, 9 to noon every day on Cairo News Radio. And he was asking me, okay, so are they going to sign Geno? And, I think G kind of plays dumb a little bit on that show sometimes because, it's a different audience, and he's sort of setting the guest up to be the quote-unquote expert. Yeah, something like that. And I was like, well, now they have an opportunity for another data point. How does he do in the postseason? How does he do in the playoffs? Does he bring it? Is he able to win playoff games? And G was like, dude, you're moving the goalposts. Now all of a sudden, he hasn't had a great year. Now you got to wait to see what he does in the playoffs. And I think it's a fair question, but I would argue back, in fact, did yesterday, and said, well, not really, because I think that they should have signed him or could have signed him to a reasonable deal 6, 8, 10 weeks ago. When that didn't happen because either Geno wanted to, play out the string or get to free agency or whatever the case may be, or didn't want to sign a deal at some sort of a bargain price. Well, once you're going to go till now, you might as well take all the data points in you can. And certainly how you perform in the playoffs is a big one, is it not?
Absolutely. And how you performed here down the stretch when things did change. That paradigm shifted. You went from the underdog, oh my gosh, what a story, comeback player of the year, MVP candidate, unreal numbers, a team that was expected to do nothing. It's a whole lot easier to play in those circumstances and situations. And then all of a sudden there's a 4-game winning streak, you're 6-3, and now you become the hunted.